I want to also share a few thank yous. This is an amazing community of which I'm, extremely grateful to be a part of. I want to thank Zippy Wexler, the librarian in our Henry Core library, who heads up the lecture series each winter. I am honored to be one of the speakers as a part of this very impressive and intimidating list of lecturers who've spoken in the past. Thank you, Zippy, for your hard work, and Elizabeth Dorfman, who also works diligently and tirelessly behind the scenes. And Melissa Jabinski, our tech guru, who's making tonight possible. Without her, I wouldn't be doing this. And a couple more people. I want to thank our Rabbi Katz, who answers my questions. He has with such alacrity, he answers the questions as almost if he knew what I was going to ask. And it's just a joy to have a rabbi who's such a great teacher and with such a generous response to any inquiry at all. And I want to thank Bernie Wolf, our Gabbai Rishon, who very generously allowed me to get inside the sanctuary, pulled out a bunch of Torahs for me, scrolled patiently back and forth while I selected the passages that I wanted to share with you tonight. So thank you, Bernie. And if I left anybody out of the thank yous, please forgive me. Okay, so I want to share my screen now. So let me just figure out how to do that. Hold Shift. No, I don't want multiple windows. So I want to share this. Okay. So now, are you seeing, what are you seeing, Melissa?
I'm seeing graphic design in the Torah, and I'm seeing yourself, and there should be nobody else being recorded. So there's you and your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so graphic design in the Torah, is there any? Before we get into the design of the Torah, I want to talk a little bit about the codification of the text and the design itself. Hang on a second. The oldest Torah scroll in existence that follows our current layout and design is the Ein Gedi scroll, which was discovered in Ein Gedi in Israel in 1970. It was found in the burned remains of a Torah ark, an actual ark, in the ruins of the ancient synagogue in Ein Gedi. What was discovered inside the ark was severely damaged by a fire that is dated around 600 in the Common Era, the year 600, and the scroll appeared as burned chunks of charcoal. Radiocarbon testing dates it to approximately the 3rd or 4th century of the Common Era. The Ein Gedi scroll contains a portion of the biblical book of Leviticus, Vayikra, making it the earliest copy of a Torah book ever found in a holy ark. The deciphered text fragment is identical to what became in the Middle Ages the standard text for our current Hebrew Bible, known as the Masoretic text. The Ein Gedi scroll precedes these versions by several centuries, constituting the earliest evidence of this authoritative text version. The Dead Sea Scrolls are older, but include variations to the text and layout. So even though the content is the same, it's not considered the mantra, the golden example that we use today. A Torah scroll contains 304,805 letters, all of which must be duplicated precisely by a trained scribe or a sofer, an effort which may take as long as a year or a year and a half. The scribe must mark out the parchment using the sargal, the ruler, ensuring that the guidelines are straight. And if you'll notice in this photograph, can you see my cursor? The lines, it's not marked with pencil or pen. It's marked with, it's indented with an impression. There's a tool that the scribe uses to create the lines perfectly distanced from each other, where the letters will hang. Unlike the English alphabet, only a top guide is used. When we learn penmanship, we have the top line, the bottom line, the middle line. We use all kinds of lines when we're learning how to write in English. The Hebrew alphabet only uses a top line as the guide, and the letters are suspended from that line. They don't sit on it, they hang from it. The top line represents a kind of barrier, and it symbolically delineates a boundary between the writing and that which exists above the writing. None of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet go beyond this limit, except for one, the Lamed. The letter Lamed reaches above the line. Lamed, of course, we know means to learn. And learning requires that we reach above and beyond limitations and barriers. So the Lamed visually illustrates what learning kind of means. The fidelity of the Hebrew text is considered paramount, down to the last letter and space. Transcribing is done with painstaking care. Very strict rules apply to the position and appearance of each letter. So here we have Bereshit, the first word in the first line of our Torah, of the first book in the Torah. And you'll notice that the beit is oversized. We have the first initial drop cap letter ever to be used. And this precedent, this design precedent set in motion a design principle, design treatment that we use today. Because of its size, because it's larger than the normal first letter, it signifies energy and importance. So everybody has picked up on that, including early on, Johannes Gutenberg. This is a page from the Gutenberg Bible, the first book, almost one of the first books to be printed in around 1455. So 1500 years after that, that Torah text was found in, was used in Ein Gedi. What Gutenberg did was he created what's called movable type. So there were these metal trays where he would line up the letters to spell out the words. But in the case of the drop cap, the initial drop cap, this enlarged letter that he takes from the concept of the big beit in Bereshit, what he did was he left this part of the tray blank, knowing that this letter would be hand done. So in the early days of printing, book printing, when you see a large letter, it was done by hand. And in fact, in this case, you can see that not only was it painted with these, one feather brush, one hair brush, but there was also gold leaf that was laid in. And then there was red, treatment that was given to some of the letters to create more importance. So a lot of the work that was done was still done by hand, even though we were moving to a more modern technology of print. But he borrowed from the idea of the Torah, that large initial cap. And this is an example of how a large initial cap is used today. This is a page from this month's The Atlantic magazine, an article about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And Mohammed bin Salman is his name. The first letter of his name, M, is enlarged letter with a lot of space around it. We're going to talk about space in a minute. But this is also a design, the same design concept that's borrowed from Bereshit. Sometimes it's not just the letter. We'll enlarge a word or a phrase. In this case, the same concept applies, but it applies in this case to 3 words. It all began. So let's go back to Bereshit. The Hebrew alphabet is beyond special. There's no way to express how multi-layered, multi-meaning, multi-everything the Hebrew alphabet is. Unlike other alphabets, every letter has a meaning, and it also has a numerical value. So we know that the beit means house, but it also has the numerical value of 2. So a lot of people talk about, okay, why does Torah begin with Aleph? That would make sense. We should have had a word with Aleph. Why do we start with beit? What happened to the first letter? So in a couple of weeks, we're going to sing Echad Miyodea, who knows one? We know who one is. One is God. God is the Aleph, and God is on this side of the beit. What came before? So and don't forget that Hebrew is from right to left. So the beit points us in direction of what's ahead. in the shoresh for the word Bereshit is of course Rosh, head. So, and that's telling us you're going to head this way. You're going this way, guys. It's God's design that we've got this nice little house that we're starting from, nice warm house, and we don't go in this part. We don't need to know that part. That's what came before. And God gives us a little clue here. He says, right, Hayita tohu vavohu, and before this it was chaos, tohu vavohu. And so I like to think of tohu vavohu as, I'm from New York, as if you couldn't tell with this accent. Tohu vavohu, when it snows in New York, it looks like this white, pristine thing. But I think of the universe as this cold and bitter place out there, until God invented the planets and the sun and to keep us warm. Out there it was cold. So I think of the universe as, freezing, snowy. But, in New York, after the snow, in like a couple hours, it gets like this slushy, black, gross, it gets, jumbled up with all this, the rocks and everything. And it's cold and it's miserable. And I think, that was what was out there. That was tohu vavohu, the chaos. So I'm very happy to start in this nice, warm little house, even if it's the number 2, and go this way. All right, so let's talk about some other things. So the alignment of the Torah is what's called justified, meaning that all the text lines up on the right, but it also lines up on the left. Now, in the word processing programs, you click a button and it just lines up. In the old days, when these were done by hand, you had to make it fit. And every word in the Torah is the same in every Torah. So it starts with Bereshit on the first line and it ends with Haaretz, the first line, always the same. And every line is always the same. So what do you do if you're doing your calligraphy and you get to a word and I'm gonna have too much space at the end? You extend the letter. So you'll see that there are letters that are inconsistent in width. You have a resh here that's smaller than this resh here. And the scribe will do that throughout the entire text of the Torah to make it fit. So you have this perfectly hand-done, justified left margin that, before computers, this was an art. This was just this brilliant, brilliant design. The other piece of design treatment that the Torah uses brilliantly is space. Space in design is your best friend. It helps us navigate. And the Torah teaches us that, so this is Yom Echad, this is after the first day, we have this little space. So we know that the next thing was going to start something new, Yom Sheni. So we get the next paragraph. So the space tells us where we are. When we get to the end of a book, this is the end of Bereshit. Yosef gets put in a coffin in Mitzrayim. We get 4 lines that are blank, 4. That's how we know that we're starting a new book in the Torah. Vayele Shmot, here's Shmot. We're going to start the second book of the Torah. And here when we get to these 4 lines, we say Hazak, Hazak. So this space is brilliant. It's just genius. It tells us, oh, here, we're starting something new now. And without it, it would be really impossible to find where we are. So designers know this from our Torah. This is an introduction to a chapter on text from a book called Thinking with Type, written by Ellen Lupton. She's actually one of my favorites. She's a professor at the University of Maryland and teaches design. She's also a brilliant designer. And this is one of my favorite pieces of writing that about text construction. Designers provide ways into and out of the flood of words by breaking text up into pieces and offering shortcuts and alternate routes through masses of information. And I can't emphasize enough that this is our generation is probably exposed the most to an utter constant bombardment of words, more so than any other generation that came before us. So the idea that what a designer does in terms of trying to organize that text and provide direction for us is more vital than ever. So from a simple indent, like a paragraph indent like this, signaling the entrance to a new idea, to a highlighted link. This one is red, but we know when we see it in blue and it's got that line under it that it's going to take us, it's going to jump us to another page in the website. Typography helps readers navigate the flow of content. This is from our Torah. The user could be searching for a specific piece of data, like let's say you're scrolling and you're looking for the next book in the Torah, or struggling to quickly process a volume of content in order to extract elements for immediate use. Although many books will define the purpose of typography as enhancing the readability of the written word, one of design's most humane functions is, in actuality, to help readers avoid reading. I love that concept. Space helps the designer, guide you so you don't have to read, you don't have to bother with stuff that you don't want to bother with. Space also serves a purpose in meaning. So what do I mean by that? This is the beginning of the last parsha in Bereshit, Vayhi Yaakov ba'aretz Goshen. Then Jacob lived in the land of Goshen. But if we take a look, there's no space at all. Jacob is stuck. He's locked in. He can't leave. And he doesn't have a choice. It's not great. He's stuck there. And the Torah tells us that visually by the way this page, this parsha is designed. And in fact, he so doesn't want to be in Egypt. He tells his sons, his dying wish, don't bury me here, get me out of here. And they do, they honor his dying wish. They take him to Hebron and he's buried in Israel. But the parsha is, I want to actually go back to Shmot. Joseph, the parsha ends with the word Mitzrayim. We're stuck there. And that's what this opening phrase for the parsha illustrates. Then we get to this. This is probably my all-time favorite Torah portion in the whole scroll. This is, of course, the Song of the Sea, the moment, the redemptive moment in Judaism. And there's so much going on here. I just absolutely love it. Space, the final frontier, is used in the most brilliant way. First of all, I want to bring to your attention the fact that so the column width is wider here than in any other column in the Torah. It's the widest column. So we get to the part where the sea parts. We get to the moment in our story, in our lives as Jews, where the waters part. And we are saved by Hashem. Micha mocha b'li mar Hashem. This is smack in the middle. We're right at the heart of this beautiful moment. Hashem is taking us out of slavery, out of this locked in design, to this beautiful freedom. We're going to cross the sea on dry land. And the words are interwoven with this space, this idea of freedom and all the luxury of all this space around us. And it's illustrated by the design. So this is a song. And songs in the Tanakh, not just in the Torah, but all throughout the Tanakh, the Song of Torah, they have a structure that is unique to that song. And they're technical terms that are used to describe the structure. The structure of this particular song is what's called half a brick on a whole brick, meaning if you take a look at it, the words are interlaced. It's a very, very, very strong, even though it's got all this space in it, it's a very strong, sturdy construction. You can't pull it apart because the words and the spaces are so interwoven. It's just a solid piece, even though there's this space there. I'm going to show you another example of a song in a little bit towards the end of my talk, of a completely different structure for what's called the bricks, the brick building that goes into the design. Notice, so every word has to be, like as I mentioned before when we were looking at Bereshit, every line has to begin with the same word, end with the same word, and the phrase, the center, has to all line. So you'll see these extended hays or reishes or dalets that are used to stretch out the word to make it fit. So it does become this perfect unit of design and structure. But space is also used not just in songs, but in other ways to emphasize other things. It's always for emphasis, because the minute we come to a space, we go, wait a second, well, what is this about? It calls our attention. Space is just, like I said, it's our, as a designer's best friend. So right now we are in the moment of the 10 commandments, not all of them. This is the second commandment. We got Zechor Yom HaShabbat Lekodesh. This is Shabbat. And then there's a little space after Shabbat, and we have mom and dad, Kavod et Avicha, and mom. And then, so that's part of the first 5 of the positive commandments that have to do with our relationship with God. Then we get to the second 5. The second 5 have to do with our relationship with each other. And so what are our instructions? How do we relate to each other? God's telling us, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Low. So it's all stacked up in this tower. But unlike the half brick, whole brick construction of the redemptive moment, low is this very fragile, very delicate, volatile tower that can topple in a second. One rests on top of the other, which rests on top of the other, which rests on top of the other. The idea in my mind being that, it's a slippery slope. If you don't have any compunction about bearing false witness, what else could you do? Coveting somebody's things, or spouse, heaven forbid, or murder, or all the other stuff. Once you're a crummy person, then it all starts to topple. And I think that this little construction tells us exactly that it's fragile. It's this narrow, delicate, tiny column that everything rests on. And we have to be diligent about our behavior, how we talk to each other, how we treat each other. This passage, which I also love, is another use of space. This, of course, is the priestly blessing, the blessing of the Kohanim. And to me, and this is not, you won't find this in any commentary, Torah commentary. To me, the space looks like a heart, like a sideways heart. And I just love it because, it's God telling Moshe to tell Aaron and his sons that this is how he's going to bless the children of Israel. And he gives us the exact words, and he's behind it. God's backing it up. That I'm going to bless you and guard you, turn my face towards you and be good to you, and I'll turn my countenance towards you and grant you peace. L'cha shalom. So, and we say this, the Kohanim say it to us, but we say it to our children on Friday night. There's this caring, shared, hugging. It's almost like the space is hugging the blessing. And I just love the form that it takes in this section of the Torah. Okay, not just space, but this is our first parenthetical phrase ever. If you take a look, we've got these tiny little upside down nuns. So God invented the parentheses. Of course, parentheses is a Greek word. Do I have that? Yeah, I did. Parentheses are a stylistic device that writers insert into a paragraph or passage to qualify or explain. Writers mark these explanatory clauses with round or square brackets or commas or dashes or little lines or little upside down nuns. As far as its purpose is concerned, this verbal unit provides extra information. It interrupts the syntactic flow of the words and invites readers to pay attention. There's an explanation that's going on. So what is this passage? There are a couple of theories about it, like everything in Judaism, there's multiple ideas. What came before and what comes after are not so great. We walk away from God's mountains. Maybe this wasn't the best, most exemplary moment of our behavior. And then after this, we start complaining. The Jews, start complaining about the desert and whatever. And Moshe's dragging us around. But smack in the middle, there's this idea of faith. This parenthetical phrase, we stop in our tracks whenever there's something unusual. it's not just the space, but in this case, this parentheses, this is an insertion. It's an insertion because it's telling us that something is happening. What's happening? This is actually the phrase that we say when we take the Torah out of the ark. Vahi ben so Aaron vayomer Moshe kumar Hashem vayafutzu oivecha yanusu misanecha mi panecha. Here we would go into Kimitzion, but it's telling us that when they would go around, they would travel with the Aaron, with the ark. Moshe would say, "Rise up, Hashem, and protect us, and be with us, and protect us from our enemies, save us, help us to get to our desired destination." And this idea, this total faith, is deliberately in the middle of these examples of not such exemplary behavior on the part of the Israelites. So the parentheses tell us that there's something important that we need to keep in mind, even while we're reading this passage. So today we use this. So like I said, everything is borrowed from the Torah. We learn everything from the Torah. This is from a magazine from April 22. This is current. Take a look at how this parenthetical phrase is used with space around it. It's telling us something that to be for emphasis, for the idea of emphasizing, a thought, an idea. This is from that same article, another example of what's called a pull quote in editorial design. In terms of editorial design today, if we would do something like this, it's called a pull quote. And we give it a different text treatment, different color. In this case, it's on a green background. And in this case, instead of little upside down nuns, the designer has chosen to use some little lines on the top and the bottom. And of course, obviously they want, they're telling this story, of how Muhammad is saying that the Saudi Arabia is going into the 21st century, yeah, sure. During the 1990s and 2000s, Saudi Arabia was a net explorer vision, but it was the jihadist vision. 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudi citizens. So it's reminding us, don't be fooled. Okay, we started our talk by looking at that big beit. And there are lots of incidences throughout the Torah where you have oversized letters, or actually little tiny letters. You know what, I have to apologize. I'm getting a low battery. I'm gonna, two seconds, I just gotta plug this in. Don't go away. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that, I'm back. So, wait, did I lose my glasses? Yes, here. So this is, of course, the Shema. And this is an example of oversized letters. We have an oversized ayin and an oversized dalet. So like any design treatment, when there's something that's different, we go, wait a second, why is that different? What are they telling us here? There are a couple of different theories, but the one that I feel that I connect with the most is the idea that ayin and dalet spell aid, which means witness. And the Shema is, of course, the watchword of our faith. We say it twice a day. The idea that Hashem is our God and he's one. The God of the universe is our God and he's one God. And we say it with other faith. And the idea of witness, to me, even in English, we use the phrase as God is my witness. Because in reality, we know that nobody can know what's in our hearts. Only we know what's in our hearts and God. And the idea that God is our witness is to me illustrated by the design of the phrasing for the Shema. And I just cannot, like that idea that that those letters stand out. and make that phrase that much more important, that we need to say it with a whole heart, our whole soul, and our whole meodecha, our veriness. Okay, this is Haizinu. It is the second to last portion in the Torah. And it's Moses' song. It's a song that Moses sings. I don't know what kind of song he sang, but how it sounded, but it's a song that he sings to the children of Israel. He's, obviously dying. It's the end of the book. And he wants to give them instructions. He's giving them instructions. The whole book of Devarim is giving them instructions. But this song is written in this very unusual format, this unusual design. So this is this brick on brick idea that I was talking about before. Unlike the Song of the Sea, where the words are interlaced and interwoven and structured in a way that's very hard to pull apart. Haizinu is not like that at all. Haizinu is brick on brick and can topple. But it also has another idea. The Kabbalists describe this as being the right and left hand of Hashem. Now, we know one of the tenets of Judaism is that God is incorporeal. There is no body. When there are no limbs, there's no organs. That's not what God is. So when we say, when we reference a part of the body, God's eyes or his hands, those are metaphors for characteristics, for traits. So when the Kabbalists say his right hand, the right hand is the right hand of mercy. And when they say the left hand is the hand of judgment. So the words that are used in the right-hand column of this song are parts of the story where God is merciful to the children of Israel. But of course, Moshe is also admonishing the children of Israel and telling them, look, if you're going to push the envelope and not follow the rules, you're going to get in trouble. And judgment, the left hand, judgment is going to fall on your case. You're going to get in trouble. And things are not going to go well. So we have this, with this big abyss in the middle, this idea of mercy and this idea of judgment. And also, again, it's this brick on brick structure, which is not as powerful or strong as the interwoven. So it can topple easily. So it's designed to impart this idea of, how precious it is that these towers can topple if we're not careful. And that's, believe it or not, my last slide. So I will open the floor to questions and happy to talk about anything that I've covered in tonight's presentation.
Thank you very much, Therese. Do you want to stop sharing so that we open up the gallery and everybody can see everybody?
Sure. Hang on 2 seconds. Okay.
There we go. There is one question in the chat, that being, it might not be said exactly the way she means, but how do they type the graphic on the Torah? Do they do ordinary typing?
There's nothing typed on the Torah. The Torah is handwritten with an ink, a special kind of ink, and a special kind of pen. There's no typing, zero. And it's on parchment, which is an animal skin that's treated in a very special way, which is why Torahs last so long. Unlike paper, it's made from something that's far more durable and far more precious.
Would you say that the font in the Torah is also been exactly the same?
No.
For all the millennia?
No, in fact, from Torah to Torah, every scribe has a slightly different handwriting. So you will see some, and depending also on the size of the parchment. So for example, when Bernie and I went to photograph this series for this presentation tonight, there were several Torahs that we looked at. one that's very big, but it was too hard to roll and heavy. So while the writing in it is beautiful, we rejected it just for efficiency because we knew that we would just be there for hours rolling it back and forth. Torah that we ended up using is it's from the Fink family, I believe. I mean, it's a very small, lightweight Torah. So just by the fact that the parchment is shorter, the letters are shorter and a little bit wider. They have a squat shape, if you will. The taller parchment has a more elongated font. So there's variations in the font style from Torah to Torah today. And certainly going back in history, I'm sure that there were variations that each scribe brought to their work. And also there are these little crowns that are added on some of the letters. So the crowns also take on slightly different designs depending on the artist, the scribe who's creating the work.
Could I ask a question? I didn't put this down in the chat. This is Mitch. Hi. Although I've laned a number of sidrot, I never knew until you said this that every line is identical in every Sefer Torah. But what I have noticed, because there's a memory involvement in learning a Sedra, is that different Sefer Torah still, they don't have the same number of lines necessarily in a column. So one Sidra in one Sefer Torah will start at a different point although there are many Sifrei Torah where they will start the same Sidra in the same spot, there are some Sifrei Torah which are different in that respect. So it's clear to me that there are not the same number of lines in a column, because I have sometimes struggled because I've learned it from one Sefer Torah and I end up learning it from a different one, and it's not in the same place. I don't know if there's an observation that you have about that.
Yes, there is exactly. There are, I think it's 41 lines in an Ashkenazi and 52 in a Sephardi Torah. They're different. The actual number of lines that are included in each column is different depending on the Torah, the Ashkenazi or Sephardi. So you're
even I think between some Ashkenazi Sifrei Torah, I think there are differences in the number of lines, because I've never learned from a Sephardi Sefer Torah, but I have learned from Ashkenazi Sifrei Torah, and sometimes the Sedra starts in a different spot, and that can throw you a little bit sometimes.
Sure. Sure. Very, very, very interesting observation.
Can I ask a question, David Marriott? You were talking just a few moments ago about the crowns, etc., that were put on the Sefer Torah. They're not just crowns or other objects. Apparently, and I don't know, but apparently they have very, very special meanings. Our son-in-law has he's a sofa stum, and he has written many Sifrei Torah, and he said that one of these days he would give me a long brief on what these various items mean. I don't know whether they're the same in all Sifrei Torah, or they depend on the actual sofer who has written them. But it's quite a separate thing altogether from the actual fonts, the letters themselves.
Yes, and the crowns are only on specific letters. I know it's the shin. There are only a couple of letters that will take a crown. It's not anything that's left to chance. It's very specific which letters will carry a crown.
And the different flowers as well.
Yeah. There's nothing about it that's random. It's all very, very deliberate.
Correct.
Therese.
Hey, Bernie. How are you?
Good, thank you. Fantastic presentation, thank you. I think that people should also know that before a scribe, a sofer, puts one mark on the Sefer Torah, but any time during the writing, he makes a specific bracha. Okay, and before he is allowed to write the name of Hashem in the Sefer Torah, and usually they leave the word Hashem till the very end, okay, and then fill it. They must go to the mikveh, insert themselves in the mikveh, immerse themselves in the mikveh, because they're coming to write the holiest of names in the Sefer Torah. So it's a very complex process that everyone should understand. And the reason why you pay a lot of money to have a Sefer Torah written is because it takes the sofer a long time. As Therese said, it can be a year, it could be a year and a half. Some sofrim can do it in 7 or 8 months, but they are working constantly on that Sefer Torah. So it's a very, very complex procedure from beginning to end.
Yeah. Very holy work.
Yeah. And their thoughts, you have to remember one thing, they're supposed to have total pure thoughts in their mind and concentration when they're writing every single letter of the Torah. They're not allowed to wander and think of something else. So it's very, very concentrated application that they bring to the writing of the Sefer Torah.
I don't think I could do it. I would be a wreck. Even just transcribing a phone number, I have to look back and forth like 10 times to make sure that I got the numbers right. Can you imagine sitting and writing every letter of the Torah and making sure that it's absolutely perfect? And and the spacing is right. My nerves would be shot. Forget it.
Yeah, the other thing that I saw this week, because we had to do a slight repair on my own Sefer Torah, that when they finish writing the Sefer, they write them in pages, okay? And those pages, how are they put together? They're actually sewn, okay, with a special thread to sew those pages together. And it's very, very interesting how they pierce each one of the pages with a little probe and then thread with a needle the threads to tie the pages together. Very, very intricate work, and it's all part of the tremendous cost for a Sefer Torah.
And it's a natural fiber. So, a lot of times
Yes,
when somebody will do Hagba, they'll hold it up. You can see these variations in the coloring of the parchment because it's a natural fiber. It has the coloring of the animal. So it's so durable because of that.
When Moshe Rabbeinu saw that God is putting on those crowns on the letters, he asked him, what are those crowns for? So there'll be a person, Rabbi Akiva, who will darshan on each crown a lot of halachos. Do we have any halachos that we know that Rabbi Akiva darshaned on those crowns?
I don't know. We can ask our rabbi. I'm sure he would probably be able to shed some light. I apologize. I'm not well versed.
Also, I want to point out that the nun hafuchois that we have by Yehimu Zohar, Rabbi Soloveitchik said that those nun hafuchois indicate that the whole Jewish history became perverted at that time. It was supposed to go straight into Israel, and when they happened with Korach, this was an indication that's not going to go so smooth. That's what he said. That
He's right. Didn't go so smooth.
Yeah.
The spies messed us up.
I chip in? The crowns, they are, you're right, standardized. And if you look in some of the Sidurim, they have pictures of the crowns. And some editions of the Shulchan Aruch have pictures of the crowns. But there are some places where the crowns vary or don't appear at all, where one expects to find them. And there's all sorts of traditions and explanations for the missing ones and the variations. They're never, it's not as simple as it sounds when you say these crowns go on certain letters. That's true. But then suddenly they don't appear, or one doesn't appear. And it's not a mistake. There are traditions about those as well.
Therese, maybe I could just make 2 other observations. The first is, it's almost a fact of human nature So I have often seen these different passages, and it's your speech is an example of something which I now realize for 50 years has stared me in the face, and I've never thought about it. Like, the space between these different columns. It takes a different pair of spectacles to look at the same parchment in a different way, which I think you've done this evening. Also, something that you said reminded me of a personal anecdote, which actually relates to Megillat Esther rather than the Sefer Torah. But one of my best friends in life, who is sadly now deceased, I used to sit next to him in Shul in London. And until very recently, I never had a Megillah of my own. And I would bring my little tatty old sort of printed copy, and he had from his father his Megillah. And he told me very proudly that his Megillah is called a Melech Megillah. And a Melech Megillah is a Megillah where the first word of each column of the Megillah is Hamelech. And a part of, I'm sure there are many interpretations that maybe many others on this call will know of, but what I had explained to me was that Hashem's name doesn't appear in the Megillah, but that the word Hamelech is thought to have connotations. A lot is hidden. There's a whole concept of stira, of things that are hidden and concealed, and God's face was concealed from the story of the Megillah, and his name doesn't appear, but Hamelech does. And that one particular way of writing the Megillah is to put the first word of every single column as, it's not the only way Megillah is written, but it is one way in which Megillah are written is to put the word Hamelech at the front, the first word of each single column, which I now realize, having heard you, is a design feature to, in a way, make prominent the fact that maybe the real Hamelech is there, even if we don't actually see Hashem expressly referred to. I simply wanted to share the observation.
That's great. I love it. Also, in the Megillah, at the end, when the names of Haman's sons are listed, that design is also like that brick design,
Yes.
where it's going to topple over.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's also, it follows that concept. So there are almost everything has in our Tanakh has some important design elements. We just need to look to see them.
Fascinating. Thank you.
There was something wrong about that, Mitch. If you think about it, the first column can't begin with Hamelech. It begins with Vayihi B'mei
That's
and
true.
and the 10 sons are also, and there are one or two other places where I don't think it's right. I've got a Hamelech Megillah as well, but it isn't every column.
No, that's fair. I stand corrected, but it is, I think, the large majority of columns at least.
Chris, can I just go back to the very first point that you made about the bet, Bereshit, right? The very first slide. I'm not sure everybody really picked up on what you were saying. So let me just clarify. If you look at the bet, it's closed at the top, it's closed on the right-hand side, and it's closed at the bottom. The Midrashim say the reason why it's closed at the back is because no one is supposed to know what happened before creation. So everything before creation is blocked off. No one knows, okay, until, I guess, Moshiach arrives and everything is revealed, but that will never be revealed until Moshiach arrives, okay? We don't know what's above, okay? That's blocked off as well, because we have no idea what goes on in Shamayim. And below the blocked off at the bottom is Chas v'Chalila. We don't want to know what goes on in Gehenna either. Okay. The only opening is to the future, as we read it forward. We are only interested in what happens in the future, not what happens above, below, or prior to the creation.
Thank you.
Brian, you had a comment?
Yeah, fascinating lecture. Thank you very much for the talk. I was especially interested in how you described the Birkat Kohanim. As a Kohen, I've never actually seen that part in the Torah, because I've never called up for that part. It looks like a heart, but it also might look like a V. So two observations. If it looks like a heart, perhaps it is a remiss to what the last word in the bracha that Kohen said before he blessed the people, but ha'ava, with love. So the Kohen can only bless the people if he's at one with the people. It's not an us and them, it's all us together. And also when you look at it, perhaps it looks like a V, which is another sign where the Kohen actually blesses the people. His hands are shaped in a specific way, like Mr. Spock showed. It's not, we're not supposed to show it. It was just fascinating to see that little bit of design. Thank you very much for the excellent talk. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Sorry, this is for everybody, not just for Therese. The Hazino part, okay? Does anybody know why the first column, the block, the horizontal block is at the bottom, sorry, is at the top, and in the second column, the horizontal block is at the bottom. So you've got two pillars. The first part of Hazino, the block is at the top, and the second part of Hazino, the block is at the bottom. Does anybody know why?
Don't know.
No. Okay.
Have to
Question for the rabbi.
Try again.
Michael?
Maybe it just represents haaretz v'hashamayim. Hazinu haaretz v'hashamayim. Hashamayim v'aretz. Hazinu hashamayim v'aretz. So one block represents hashamayim, the other block represents haaretz. If you just take the first sentence from Hazinu, there'll be another graphic.
Michael, unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I would like to point out a very interesting thing. In the Sedra Ki Tavo, which comes in Devarim, there are two words written, and we don't say them at all. We say something completely different. If you look at, I've got it in front of me, in Devarim, chapter 28, 28, verse 27, there's a word there that's written, you're not supposed to say, but I will say, uvafolim, but we don't say that word at all. So if you look in the Chumash, it will tell you the word that you should say. So it's very interesting because people who are listening in the congregation will think that whoever's laning has said the wrong word. No, he's quite right. It's handed down by Masorah tradition that these two words, which are written in the Sefer Torah, are not said at all. They're not said. Something completely different is said. So instead of the word uvafolim, you'll see that it's written down at the bottom of every chumash what it should be, and in this particular case, it's uvat chorim. And then there's another one which comes and it says, and it's yishkavena, and you have a different word. So it's fascinating. It's the only two words in the whole of the Sefer Torah which has a different, where it's in the same Sedra, where you have two different words completely said by the Baal Korah, as opposed to what is written in the Sefer Torah.
Michael, just adding to that, there is one other word, a name actually, that is pronounced differently by different congregations. The word is Yisachar. Okay?
That's a different.
So you've got a Yud, Shin, Shin, Chaf, Resh.
Yeah.
Now, when we lived in Boston and I davened in Rav Soloveitchik's Shul, they would always say Yisachar, and then they'd go back again and read it again. The word Yisachar.
That's right.
Okay, and again, that's a very, very unusual minhag.
Different tradition. You're quite
Yeah.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Bernie's point that we have a similar example on Shabbat Zachor where we say Zecher and Zecher through different traditions as well, and we repeat the word.
Correct.
Can I ask another question, please? You have not mentioned at all the actual music of the Sefer Torah, and you've got both at the top and the bottom of the words how you actually sing the Sefer Torah. And I know that there are different traditions of the way that it might be sung, but I just wondered whether you've got any comment on that part.
that's handed down from Sinai, from Mount Sinai. It's a tradition handed down all the way from Sinai, and these are called Naginot. And there's Pashto, Munach, Zarko, Segol, and that's why Bar Mitzvah boys learn how to sing using the traditional notes. But it's handed down from Sinai. It's a very interesting thing.
It's interesting, Michael, that the Sephardim sing it entirely differently to the Ashkenazim.
They do.
Yeah.
The Yemenites, Taimanim, sing it yet again. There's different traditions, absolutely. Yes. Very interesting.
There are no other questions.
Now is from Ezra. Before, the Aleph base was different than that what we have now.
And how is this? How is this affected by you said you started off by talking about an Engedi, the Torah, as far as the print, as far as
The letters.
The letters, are they the same as the ones we have today, or are they the original ones?
They're the same. That's the point.
It's after Ezra. That's after Ezra. We don't have any Sifrei Torah which is written in the previous letters before Ezra changed it, do we?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
The oldest one that we have is the one from Ein Gedi, and we follow that design till this day.
But that's
So when you
all-
say the Dead Sea Scrolls were older and different, was the text, were the letter formations also different?
Not the letters, but the phrasing, and there's also different words that are used.
But the
Yeah.
letters are
Pretty
maintained.
close, yeah.
Okay. All right, Sippy, could we invite you to speak at this time?